interviewing May Walker today, and today is October 8th, 2015. May has told us quite a few stories over the summer. Earlier this summer we interviewed her husband Bob, and May had some just fantastic stories about growing up in Pemberton, and we wanted to interview her this year. May is Pemberton's oldest Pembertonian. She was born and raised in Pemberton, and she knows all of the old stories, the old families, and some of the old legends. So we wanted to have a chat. So May, we wanted to start by asking you about your dad, Bob Taylor, and his family, because I understand he came as a young man.
Mm-hmm.
So you were saying he was given some lands?
His dad was in the army. I don't know what he was. He was in the army anyway, and after the war, the Soldier Settlement Board gave the men so many acres of Pemberton Valley, and he and two other guys got 300 acres, and the other two didn't want theirs, so they sold theirs and moved out. But Dad stayed on his 100 acres.
Okay.
And it's just south of the graveyard.
Up the valley?
Up the valley.
Okay. And your dad came with his mom, who was known as Granny Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
What was her first name? Ada?
Ada Cummings Taylor.
Ada Cummings Taylor. And you told me that Granny Taylor was Pemberton's first and most active midwife.
Mm-hmm. She attended to 27 babies in Pemberton.
27 babies.
Mm-hmm.
Mount Currie as well?
No, Mrs. Purden.
Mrs. Purden was the midwife in Mount Currie.
Mm-hmm. But not that early, like not as early as Granny.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Granny Taylor would be taken to a situation by Bob as part of the Pemberton Express.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there used to be a big sign on the Red Cross on the front of the PX.
Okay. Because it was an ambulance service
Mm-hmm.
as well.
The back of a pickup was the ambulance was. Yeah.
And Granny had worked in England as a midwife?
She was trained when she came out here, because she started the place in Vancouver. There's a big place down there, but she started that for midwifery.
Okay.
Can't remember the name of it right now.
But she started that organization.
Yeah, and then when Dad got this property up here, they moved up to Pemberton, and that was in 1919, I guess.
1919. And that Pemberton Express business ran until the 40s, right? Or the 50s?
50s, I think. Yeah.
So it was a general transport business, ambulance and hearse? Taxi.
Yeah, he had trucks, or got pictures of them in the winter time. They had skis on the front wheels, the skis on there. And he was quite a goer he wasn't very big. He was only about 5'4".
Your dad?
Yeah, he weighed about 99.5 pounds. So he was a real goer. Granny used to take boys out of the orphanage and to help on the farm.
Okay.
So she's had up to 5 people, 5 young boys up there.
Oh, that she brought up from orphanage in Vancouver?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they stuck around with her for years. As a matter of fact, they were the pallbearers with her funeral.
Wow. And when did Granny Taylor pass away?
Must have been 68 or something like that, 1968.
Okay.
Yeah, that would make it about right. 68, and then 20 years before she came here to be 80.
Wow.
90. I can't remember.
So she really dedicated a big part of her life to Pemberton.
Oh, Pemberton, yeah. She just loved Pemberton. She lived on the farm up the valley.
Now, why do you think she liked Pemberton so much? She seems to me she was kind of worldly. She came from England. She was living in Vancouver. Why would she be okay with settling in Pemberton?
I don't know, but I know that she chased her husband all over the world. Australia and South Africa and everything before she settled, before Dad got this property and settled down. That's all I know.
Now your family, you have a lot of siblings, right? And
Well, I had 5, but I only got 3 left now.
But you were the eldest of the family?
No, my brother,
Sonny?
R.A. Taylor.
R.A. Taylor.
Sonny, he was known as Sonny to everybody.
Okay. He was the eldest. And so there's Sonny, yourself,
And Martin.
and Martin,
And Molly.
and Molly.
And David, but we call him Blackie. And then there was Pat and Judy. They're
The two youngest.
Judy McNulty and Pat Williams.
And all of those, all of your brothers and sisters all went to the Pemberton Station School in Pemberton?
Except Molly. Molly was a little hard to handle, so she got sent out to school. She went to school in North Vancouver, lived with my mom's mother in North Vancouver.
And what was your mom's name?
Martinucci.
Martinucci?
Yeah, was Italian.
Okay.
And when her dad married, they came to Canada, but on the way out, her mother died, and she was 3 years old. And so he put her in the orphanage and kept the son. And that's when a cousin of his, who was Thomas Nye, who started the Garibaldi Lodge,
Yeah.
they adopted her. And so she was known as Mary Nye.
Okay.
Ellen Mary Nye.
And her and Bob met
Well,
in Vancouver?
yes,
Or?
up here. Mom was friends with the Green girls. They were all, and Dad used to go down when he was about 19 and do the chores when Mom was here.
Oh, okay.
But then when they were courting, he used to walk from Pemberton to Garibaldi to see her on the weekends.
Really?
He said he'd run one, like there was all greasy telephone wires on it, and he would run one and walk the other, and it took him 5 hours, I think, or something like that to get there. It was quite a romance.
Quite a romance. That's a long walk for a date.
Yeah. So anyway, then they got married and they moved to which is known as Murray's farm now. That was our farm.
Okay.
That's where I was.
That was the Taylor farm.
Yeah.
The Murray farm. So that's that farm with the big A-frame structured barn?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was that something the Murrays had built?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah. There was just a log house on there when we lived there, plus some small barns.
Okay. Now you, we just wanted to ask you a little bit about yourself. So could you tell us about your first husband and the names of your children?
That was Maximilian Albert Menzel was his name. He was in the army. And of course, I was about 17.
This was the Second World War, or the?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was in 1947, 46, 47.
Yeah.
And then when he came back from the army, we started going together, and we finally got married in 1950.
In Pemberton?
Yeah. Everybody threw snowballs instead of rice and stuff like that. Yeah. So
And you guys had a bunch of children
we had
together?
5 children.
5 children?
Donald was still in Pemberton. Donald Maximilian Albert. Donald Maximilian Albert. He got stuck with that name, and it wasn't even his dad's name because they were born on the K section in Saskatchewan, and the minister would keep track of them. That's all it was. It was in the Bible, and his name should have been Max Albert. And Donald says he got stuck with that name, Maximilian.
Maximilian.
Yeah, and then there was Robin Douglas.
Rob.
He was our second. And then William John, he was our third boy, and then Judy. Well, she's Judy Sankey now. Judy.
Yeah.
She was this third. She was married, and then there was Marie, Ada Marie. She was our last child.
And she married Joe Roman.
Joe Roman.
Yeah. So being Pemberton's oldest Pembertonian, we wanted to ask you about your memories of growing up in Pemberton. So Pemberton was a very small place when you grew up here. What was the population?
I think about 39 in the war, when they all had their books, you know, for how much sugar you could get, how much flour you could get, and all that. And I think the store had 39 books.
For rations, to track the rations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there probably was more than that, but I know that much.
Did the population increase then after the Second World War with the lands being given to soldiers?
Well, that was the First World War that they gave them land.
Oh, I thought it was after the Second World War too.
No, they could get it for $25 an acre.
After, okay.
Yeah, so that's when we bought that farm over at Pemberton, where the kids live there now. So we bought that right after we got married, and that's how we lived.
Where was that farm?
That was, do you know where that big billionaire lives there now? The one with the great big orange house?
By the McNulty's.
Yeah, yeah, they bought an acre off our farm.
Okay.
And then it goes up to Watkins all along there.
Okay. Now, your dad was really involved in the reclamation project, or the flood control project that happened in the late 40s. Can you tell us about how he was involved?
Well, I have all those letters that he wrote to the government to get money to drain the valley, because the valley was just a big bog hole.
And he was part of a committee, right? Yeah. There was a group of locals.
Well, he started it with these letters that he writes. As a matter of fact, they're all in the
we have them at the museum.
Yeah, they're in the museum. And then there's let's see here. Then he bought well, we lived on the farm of the valley until I was about 5. I had to go to school, so we moved to Pemberton. I lived in the old gas station that was down there. So.
Right next to Telfer's store and the Pemberton Hotel.
On the community hall was on the corner.
That's where the A&G is.
Yeah. Well, the A&G takes the whole works, the whole 3 buildings.
Right.
The only thing that's still there is the ladder that's on the end of the fire escape that's on the end of the hotel. When I was 16, I worked at the hotel and did the rooms, and I used to go down there and shake my mom off.
Oh yeah.
And Mrs. Telfer was down there with dust all over my flowers and stuff.
And you told me a story about old Mrs. Telfer used to hire you to cut the grass in her yard with a pair of scissors.
Yeah. Yeah, it took me about a week, and she gave me 10 cents.
It's quite the after-school job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So your dad, after the flood project happened and the rivers were straightened and the lake was lowered, he was still quite involved with the Diking district, right?
Yeah.
For many years, he was the chair.
Yeah, it was very. He only had a grade 4 education, but he just absorbed everything he heard, sort of, you know. So he used to write letters for people that needed help with, different things. But I have an article in the paper that was in the part that you'd probably be interested in.
Okay. Because that project certainly changed Pemberton forever.
When the war started in 1939, everybody left Pemberton because there was not much going on here, and there was lots of work in Vancouver and Mosey the Riveter sort of thing, and so there was only about 8 kids in the school then. I think 3 shores and 4 tailors in there or something, and the road former from the PG, he had a grandchild who lived in Littlewood, so they brought him down and brought the school up to enough kids to keep it open. So
So without that project, settlement would have been still pretty small.
Yeah.
That project freed up a lot of extra
Oh, yeah.
lands, and then people were able to move in, and you said soldiers could purchase lands at a reduced rate after the
Yeah.
Second World War?
Yeah, it was, right across from, let's see, my place. Do you know where Larry Allen's place was there, and they got that farm? Now, we got a little house down there with a bunch of animals and things in it, just as you get out of Pemberton.
Yeah?
And there was Cal Harris was a vet, and he bought land there,
Okay.
and Max bought land. But we were across the river.
And was it Lundgren the vet too?
No, he wasn't in the army, but he was at London. Was right across the road from the place that we bought.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, your dad was, as you said, a go-getter.
Yeah.
So he was involved in the Diking district. He ran the Pemberton Express. What other things was your dad involved in?
Esso gas station.
Esso gas station. That would have been the first gas station.
Mm-hmm. Well, nobody had any cars, so they needed gas. But so.
Yeah. And then you told me how you'd moved into Patnose Corner. So you lived right next to the hotel, in the gas station.
Yeah.
But then when did your family move to the house on the corner?
1948.
Okay.
Dad bought that piece of land at the corner, and that used to be Egerton.
Yes.
And when they came in the gold rush days, they came up and across the river, and then right into Egerton. Pemberton was 1 mile, because it was 1 mile out of Egerton.
Right.
So that's how it got its name. And anyway, there was a stocking house there, plus a store at Egerton. And the store was the one that Dad, he took the old stocking house down, pulled it to pieces, and him and I rebuilt the old store. And I'm kicking myself now because there was all the old books and stuff in there, we just heard them.
You said too there were toys?
Hmm?
Didn't you say there were toys too? There was old stuff left in the attic of that house?
Oh, there was lots of stuff in the house, yeah. I don't know about toys, so.
Maybe it was Judy that told me that.
Mm.
But like maybe an old doll carriage or things like that
Oh,
up in the
well,
attic.
see, Judy was just a baby. She wasn't born until 1950. 1949, I guess, or 51. I can't remember when she was born. But, no, I was in 47, I guess, because my 17th birthday, I was when Mom had promised me to have a party. No, it was 16th birthday, that's it. And I remember Betty Cherry was invited, and she says, I got a new pair of shoes and a fancy dress, and we were going to have a big party. Well, Judy McNulty was born 3 days before the party. We wrapped her in Dad's pajama pants and told me to hold her over the stove, keep her warm. It was so cold. And then Pat was born 10 and a half months later, so I didn't look too much. I did lots of babysitting.
Lots of babysitting. Now, did you take any trips to the city on the train? Can you tell us about what that journey was like?
Yeah, this was a long journey. And I remember I worked at the Darcy Lodge.
Oh, when it was the lodge.
Yeah, when it was a lodge, and we got
And who owned it then?
It'll come to me in a minute. We got $1 a day. We worked from 7 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, and then they gave us 2 hours off from 4 till 6, and we had to go back and
Served in.
another couple hours. It was $1 a day. So I worked for 38 days, and I had, or 28 days, all of August. And Sonny worked there too, and some of the other kids around. So anyway, I got that out, and I had $28. I was rich. So we decided.
And it's not like you could spend any money in Darcy either.
No. No, there was no stores or nothing around, so actually we were camping on the lake. So,
Would you take the train to Lillooet when you were working at the
no, I
lodge?
had never done that,
No.
but I did buy a ticket to Vancouver with this money I had, which was $2.80 or something, so, and I went to Vancouver with my, it must have been somebody there, but I was never going that far by myself. When I came home, I had $27. I never spent any.
So when you would go to Vancouver, at that point you would only take the train as far as Squamish, and then what would happen?
Then you would go on to one of the boats, Lady Cynthia, or the Lady Rose, or Lady Pine or something, or the Lady boats, and then they take you to that.
And how long did that steamship ride take from Squamish to Vancouver?
Let's see, down about,
Would there be a lot of wait time when you get off the train before you get on the boat?
yeah, you would, let's see, gosh, it's long ago, what sort of lost in my mind. We got on the train here at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then we'd get off about 2 in the afternoon and get on the boat. And it all depends how much freight there was and stuff to change, you know, to load onto the boat from the train. So we didn't get to Vancouver till 9 o'clock at night anyway. So it was a pretty well full day journey.
An 11-hour trip.
Yeah.
So you would go for a few days if you went to the city?
Well, if my mom was gone, or Granny was living down there at the time, and I would go stay with her. So.
Yeah.
Go and walk around with the mouth hanging open, looking at everything, and then come home again. It was too much.
Compared to
Yeah.
39 souls up in
Yeah.
Pemberton, yeah.
I know 1945, I must have been, I guess. I went to university, they had what they called rural leadership class, where we're trying to bring the kids, my age, out and teach us how to rural leadership somehow or other. I don't know what we're supposed to do. I just stayed there for 2 months and come home. I didn't like it. It was only 2 months anyway.
Yeah.
I hated it.
You weren't such a fan, so you never wanted to move to Vancouver?
Oh no.
No.
No. Definitely.
Now you had also told us that William Curry, who was the son of John Curry, he moved in and lived with you before he passed away. Can you tell us about that and how that came to be?
Well, he was a native of Mount Curry, and I guess he was drinking there, and he got his old age pension.
So his dad was John Curry, and who was his mom then?
Seraphine?
Joseph?
Joseph,
Yeah.
and I used to work in the Spuds, and one of the Joseph girls worked. We were the same age. We worked together on the Spuds, farmers. Yeah, but he was such a gentleman. They evidently got into a fight the first night he was here. I guess he didn't realize, you know. Anyhow, one of the well-known guys that lived in Mount Curry beat him up pretty badly. So when he came, he had black eyes and everything. So.
And he was a senior at this time,
Oh, yeah.
right? So you didn't know him when he was a younger man?
No, he left here in before the First World War.
Oh.
And he tried to get into the war, like going to be a soldier. And he says he was just a skinny little guy that they wouldn't take him. So then he met his uncle and his aunt, who came.
That was Mrs. McIntosh?
Yes. And they came to live with their brother here, and of course they have a native wife. So they kicked her.
They came to live with John, and he had a native wife.
Kicked her out.
They kicked her, Seraphina.
With the 3 kids, and she went to Lillooet, and she was in Lillooet there. And then one day, to the uncle and the aunt were in Little, and they met him. And they took him under the wing, and from then on he lived with them.
Oh, so he stayed with Mrs. McIntosh.
Yeah, and they ran, well, it's the same pool with the murder or whatever.
Right, they took over the Tom Pool stopping house that everyone thought was haunted, but they decided to live there anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, anyway, they lived there for a while, and then I guess it was after the war that they moved to Queen Charlotte's, and he went with them.
Okay.
And then after they both died, he came back to Pemberton, back to Montford.
And this is when you met him?
Yeah.
When he came back?
Mm-hmm.
So he'd been beaten up and had some black eyes?
Yeah, and he was such a gentlemanly old fellow that I think he was 75 when he died, so he must have been 73 when he came to our place. Max was like that. He just brought all the old timers, anybody around. He brought them. We had pretty much everybody in Pemberton lived at our house. If they come in a Kurt or something, he brought them home too.
So William moved in with you guys for 2 years before he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And did he tell you any stories that you want to share with us?
Yeah. There was Durban. I don't know whether you met that woman that was around Pemberton there for a while, like Durban?
Yes, she gave a presentation at the museum, actually.
Oh,
Arlene Carey, her parents were Durbans.
Yeah, yeah.
Or her father was a Durban, and she grew up in Seaton.
Yeah, and that's where Bill used to say that there was one of the Durbans was a school teacher there, and he had a giant crush on her. I thought she was so wonderful, but he was too shy to say anything.
This was at the Bridge River town site or up in Lillooet?
In Lillooet.
Okay.
And that's where the Durbans lived. Well, actually, if you go back far enough, we're pretty all related. Yeah. Okay.
So you said Seraphine Joseph had 3 children with John Curry.
Mm-hmm.
William was one. Who were the other 2?
I don't know.
Was it 2 other boys?
No, it was a boy and a girl.
A boy and a girl.
Yeah, you were probably more than that one.
And as far as you know, Seraphine took those children and they left the area. They went to Lillooet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you'd also mentioned going back to how the McIntoshes, and these were the aunt and uncle of John Curry. They had taken over what was called the halfway house, or the Tom Pool stopping house.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there is a legend about the murder of Tom Pool.
Oh, yeah.
There's many stories about what happened. It happened after the gold rush, and Tom Pool was murdered along with his children, and the stopping house was burned.
I didn't know about the children.
Yeah, the children were both murdered as well.
Oh.
And then the stopping house was burned down. There was a coroner, Fair, who came in from Lillooet and investigated the scene. But I'm thinking in those days, 2-3 weeks might have passed before the coroner came. So they were never really able to conclusively prove who had done it, though there were 2 different court cases. People that were implicated, and then the cases were thrown out. Was initially it was Hunter Jack, who was a chief of Darcy, and that trial went to Clinton, and then it was thrown out. And then there was some fellows that had come to the area as part of the gold rush, Scotty Halliday and William Burgess, and there was another name there. They had worked on that cattle trail that they tried to build down south, and they were living in the area. Anyway, they were eventually implicated in this murder, and the trial went on in New Westminster. But again, the jury couldn't come to a decision, so it was thrown out. But you told me that there was a legend about a priest who had heard, a confession or something?
Yeah, they confessed. Most of the natives are Catholic, and so they went and confessed to the priest. Well, this is what Bill Curry told me. So, from 2 or 3 people.
It's hearsay for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. But he said that the only way they found out was they confessed to the priest, and the priest was blabbed it.
But the priest didn't blab it until that person had passed away, right?
I don't know. That's the only story that Bill told me. You know. Of course, in those days, by the time something went about 4 different people, the story has changed right around.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we'll never know who murdered Tom Poole. But there's a legend that there was a priest who knew at some point. But he's not telling anymore either.
No.
Now another legend I wanted to ask you about, this was, there was a recent article in BC History magazine about Sasquatch. And they referenced a story about a Fred or Albert Osman who'd been stolen away by a family of Sasquatch. Now this article just made a mention of this, but I've heard this before about the Osman connection to the Sasquatch legend. And the museum has a bulldozer on site that we call the Osman cat, because he was the last person that owned it. Now this was Fred Osman who owned the cat, so I'm guessing Albert was his brother? So can you tell me what you know about the Osman Sasquatch legend?
Just what they captured him, but he wasn't a baby. The story that I heard, he wasn't a baby, he was a young man. And
he was out hunting or something?
He was out hunting, and they got him and locked him up in this cage of some kind or other. And so he gave them his snooze, and they chewed that, and he got sick, and he got away. That was the story that I heard. But Osman was quite a storyteller anyway.
Oh yeah, he liked his tall tales.
Yeah.
So in all your time though in Pemberton, you haven't seen a Sasquatch?
No. No. No, there's lots of bears around, and people thought they might. But there was one story, not too long ago, because my son was driving a truck down in the,
This was Sonny? This was your brother Sonny?
No, my son.
Oh, your son, sorry.
Yeah, Billy.
Billy.
But there was a story came in the paper about the road foreman, and he's supposed to report everything that he sees or hears. And of course he had to report to Billy Fowler, who was another legendary character. And he said that he came through the canyon, just this side of the canyon. There's this Sasquatch there, and he had a fish, and he ran across the road with the river with it. Well, this was the big talk in Pemberton for quite a while. And then, about a month later, my son was driving a truck, and he says there was something black on the side of the road that got up and ran in the bush right beside a logging truck. And so, anyway, I didn't hear about this for the longest time, because Billy said, if he doesn't say nothing, I'm not going to say anything either, because everybody was so riled up about this story. But I didn't know anything about Billy saying this until about 4 months later or something, and then he told me the story that he wasn't going to say nothing because he was scared people were thinking he was nuts, like he thought everybody else was that believed in it. So.
Now I guess you, having grown up here, you've probably seen a few floods? A few floods? Flooding?
Floods? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That was every year. We went right from when we were working on the house there at Patnod's Corner. That was in 49, because I know we didn't know Max's mother's name, so we had to go up to Henry and Phoebe's place. It was up near Guthrie Road, in that area, to find out what his mother's name was for the
marriage certificate.
Her name was Oglemissel, so that's why I remember. So anyway, we went right up the road in canoe.
In the canoe?
Yeah. Right from, well, we were living at the corner at that time, but to come across, you had to go down the track, take the boat from there, and go across to the corner, right over the top of the fences and everything. That was a really bad flood that
So there were just, floods were a regular event. You'd see them every fall.
1940, I think, was the worst one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember it was my 10th birthday, and Mom and Dad were in Vancouver, and they couldn't get home, and I didn't get a present for my birthday. I'll never forget that one. Yeah. I could go right over the top of the fence post.
But 1940 flood was a big event in the city as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
In Richmond and the lower line areas.
Yeah, that was big, because they said that it was the Pemberton Valley flooded, and then it got into the Fraser, and it flooded the Fraser River too. But there was just water everywhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
Aside from those early years, once the diking project happened and there was some flood protection, what, in your memories, was the 1984 flood then the next biggest flood? Or were there some big ones
there
too?
There was lots of floods.
Lots of floods.
That's what I remember taking, well, we were living at Pemberton, at the gas station after Judy was a year and a half old. I think I was taking her for a walk, and the water was quite deep on the road, and I dropped her, and it just seemed to take about 10 minutes to pick her up out of the water. It was that deep on the road, right on the road, right at the corner, just coming out of Pemberton.
Wow.
Yeah. There was lots of water. But once they lowered the lake, then there was no more problem.
Yeah.
And haven't had a decent flood for a long time because of had someplace to.
Do you remember any major train derailments in your time, or problems with the railway?
Well, when we were going to get married, the train didn't come through for 3 weeks, so we postponed it 3 times. And then the priest had ate some fish, and he got ptomaine poisoning. He still died too.
So it was hard to get married.
Yeah. So it was supposed to be. What was it supposed to be? It was supposed to be the 10th of February or something. I didn't get married till the 25th, I think, of February. Yeah.
Were there any derailments in the downtown part of Pemberton?
I don't ever remember it, but I know that when Dad was working, like for the first aid there was a guy called Alan, something or other, about 6'2" tall, I think. And somehow or other, he got his foot ran over by the train, swinging in. I misjudged it. My dad had to cut his toes off. Not send them into Vancouver. It was, I guess there was lots of little things, whatever.
You never did any farming, hey? Or
Farm?
did you do
I
any
was a
farming?
farmer all my life.
Well, maybe we could ask about some of your experiences farming in Pemberton. Were you
When we bought that farm over there was only a half acre cleared. And so we cleared it's all cleared now. But and I remember the first crop of spuds we took off. We had 100 sacks of potatoes. In those days, they used to send spuds out to Vancouver, and the guy that was the big wheel and selling them and everything, he would send you a little bit of money, and then when he sold them in the spring, he was going to send you the rest. Well, he sent us $100 for this 100 sacks of spuds, and of course the sacks cost about 35 cents a piece. Well, anyway, in the spring we got a check for $13, so I think there was a little bit of, Bradbury was his name.
there was some fishiness?
A little bit of it. Yeah.
And you were growing seed potatoes then?
No, we never went for seed. It was a commercial.
You did table
Yeah.
potatoes?
Yeah, and we always had cows and pigs and chickens and milk cow, sold the milk, butter.
Would you just sell the milk and butter locally?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then she would have a calf, and you butcher the calf in the fall and pay the taxes, so it was.
How did that work? You could butcher your calf yourself and then
Yeah.
you paid taxes on it?
No, you sell it.
Oh,
And
you
then
sell
get
it?
money.
I see.
Hmm?
Pay the taxes on the sale.
And then you pay the taxes on your property. And, yeah.
Didn't Pemberton also have a thistle inspector?
Yes,
Who was the thistle inspector?
that was awesome.
Austin.
Yeah, but the dikes and everything was a lot of thistles, that Canadian thistle. Anyway, everybody's place, and I remember when it came to your property, you had to do it, you know, they would bring the machine and everything. I remember riding that thing and spraying the thistles on the side.
Is it because the thistles were just an invasive plant?
Yeah,
taking
I
over
just
the
take
dike?
over, just
Okay.
took over, and there's still quite a few thistles around, but not near as bad. It was a terrible, especially on the dike where they had stirred up the ground, and the
Right.
dikes were just terrible with thistles. And of course, you couldn't get at it with any kind of machinery because of, and so they sprayed everything.
I'd heard too that there was a lot of beaver dam control in those early years with the beginning of the diking district.
Yeah,
There were
well,
different people that would get paid to trap beavers that were creating flooding situations.
Yeah, they, just as you go past the Dills up there now where you would see all those cows, all the black-eyed cows, that was Shires, and they trapped beaver there. And the same with our farm, they trapped rats and beaver and
Muskrats.
muskrat.
Yeah. Now, if you were trapping and you had furs, where did you bring those furs to? Where was your fur merchant? Was it
I
in
don't know,
Vancouver?
we never, it was before my time, sort of, but, must have been about in the 30s when, the Depression, people were doing things like that.
I see.
And I know there was quite a few people around that did trap. Harvey Derrick, he was quite a trapper. He used to trap muskrats and then he ate the muskrat after he skinned it.
Oh,
I mean, all they eat is bush, and I mean, we'll eat chickens that eat everything.
yeah. Fair enough. The museum has an old cookbook and there's a recipe for squirrel soup in there.
Yeah. That sounds about all they all eat nuts and stuff. Well, like, but the kids used to, my kid, even, well, it must have been in the 60s, they would go out and shoot some birds or something, a bougie or a robin or something, and cook it over an outdoor stove, fire or something. Just pretending they were old times. Eat that. They had their favorites. I don't know what they were. Didn't turn me on anyway. So.
I wanted to ask you about turnips, because at the museum we have information about there was quite an industry in growing turnips as well as potatoes.
Oh yeah.
So why was there such interest in turnips? Was it just the soils here were good and it was?
Well, Joe Ronan, he always was. He was the turnip king. He always had the first turnips in the spring, and they, they're hardy. They're really hardy and everything. So you could plant just after the frost was gone for very long, come on. But then they started. I don't know if it was free trade or what it was, but then they started bringing them in from
the States?
Edmonton, Alberta.
Alberta.
Yeah, and sort of white Pemberton. And Pemberton went more for seed potatoes because it's isolated and they could grow them.
But at the time, turnips were a cash crop.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Well, that's why I always say that every hemisphere must have a whole diet, and there's more vitamin C in the turnip than there is in oranges, so well, there's more, but there's a lot of vitamin C in a turnip. So
Did Bob, your dad, do any farming? Or
Oh, yeah.
was he more just running those businesses?
No, he was farming too.
Yeah.
And all us kids out there weeding. The weeds were bigger than we were. Well, he used to after he sold the farm, There was the house and barns and everything on it, and $5,000 for the whole place. And I think it just makes me sick now when I think about it. But when you turn off to go to the outdoor school, up the valley,
Yeah.
there was an old guy that lived in there, old Dump Morris, and we used to pull that field full of slugs
Oh,
on Saturday morning when we'd go.
so you would lease that field for potatoes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But in those days it was all commercial. There was no seed in those days. No.
When did the seed industry really take off?
I guess
After the flood control project?
I don't really know. I never had enough to do with them seed, potato seed. I know that Clifford Ronan has sold the seed potatoes. Well, he's gone now, but
He kind of would, him and Walter Green, I think, were some of the first seed growers.
Yeah, they had Cooper.
And the Ross brothers.
Decker.
And Decker.
They all had about an acre or 2 acres or something like that. But now they have seed that they start in the greenhouses, so that they have to have it built for 3 years before they can sell it for seed. And 2 years, 2 or 3 years.
I wanted to ask you about your dad as well. Wasn't he involved in the Pemberton Board of Trade and some of the lobbying efforts to bring the highway north from Squamish?
I imagine he was.
Because I know there was a big initiative by the Board of Trade to just raise politicians' awareness that it was great that the highway was going to go to Squamish, but what about Pemberton? And
Yeah.
a group of them drove down on the Hydro Road from Pemberton to the celebration at Squamish to say, hey, don't forget about Pemberton. And I thought your dad was involved in that
Oh, he
movement.
probably was. He was into everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was he involved in the Pemberton co-op?
No, that's one thing he wasn't involved in.
No.
That was, but everybody had money in the co-op. A lot of like Eddie Ronan and them, they would ship their spuds through the co-op. And the check would come to the co-op and they would pay the farmer. And lots of times, like I say with Eddie, I guess he had lots of money, no family. He just left his check in there, he didn't bother to take that out. So they were sort of they kind of had the co-op.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It sounds like the co-op struggled a lot through its existence.
Yeah, but a couple of people in there that weren't too honest and like you had to be honest to be in there.
It really worked on the honor system.
Yeah, Eric Geffen was, he worked in that. He was a veteran of the First World War. A lot of the old-timers in Pemberton were all veterans from the First World War.
From the Great War.
Yeah, because I know Eric, when he came, he had been right through the first everything. And he said that he only weighed about 87 pounds. And he was in the trenches and it was just awful. Everybody had dysentery and like a lot of them said, I just want to go out in the bush, I want to stay there, and that's what they did.
Yeah. Today, I guess you'd call that post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
But then, but in those days, you just dealt with it and moved to a rural area where it was quiet and peaceful.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of old guys that, all had their own ideas about things. Lots of funny old characters.
There were a lot of bachelors too. I remember
yeah.
Elsie Miller telling me about a place in Pemberton called Tin Pan Alley.
Yeah.
And that was where all the bachelors lived.
Yeah.
So where was Tin Pan Alley?
It was where Hydro place right behind Pemberton.
Up the hill, or?
No, around where the liquor store used to be and all that. That was all little shacks.
Oh, okay.
Up there, you know.
Little squats.
Yeah. Well, have their home brew and stuff.
Did you know any of the families out in Bergen or Darcy when you were?
Well,
growing up here, or would those have been pretty distant communities at the time?
Well, they were, but they just, you know, you knew of them, but you didn't make too much hope.
But you wouldn't socialize with kids from Birkin when you were growing
Well,
up?
there wasn't that many. I know that those Tinkers were in Birkin. I mean, it took 4 hours on the road to get to Birkin, or to get to Darcy. Dad used to camp up there, take us up there because the mosquitoes were so bad in Pemberton during the summertime. He used to take us up there when we got out of school and all the work was done, and we put in a couple of tents right by the beach there.
At Gates Lake? Or?
No, at Anderson Lake.
Okay.
And we would stay there until about a week before we had to go back to school, because there was no mosquitoes at Darcy. We used to have a great time there. Half of Pemberton were visiting us, and followers were up there and their kids, and the shore started to come up, and just to get away from the mosquitoes that were just there.
Would you take the train to Darcy, or?
Well, we took the truck, because Dad used to stop on the way up and cut poles for the tents and all that sort of stuff. And a few hills that we could hardly get up, and it'd take 4 hours.
What was the road like then? Just a narrow
Just a
dirt
little
track?
Track. Yeah. So.
4 hours to Darcy. Yeah, that would be like a day's journey.
Yeah. We'd leave in the morning, and the time we got there in the evening, and got the tent put up and a pail of hay, spread around to sleep on. That was about the end of the day. Mom used to have some sandwiches or something. Yeah.
What do you think would be one of your best or fondest memories of growing up in Pemberton?
Riding bicycles. Mrs. Decker was right down our neck one time, because they used to have the PG would park a car on an open car, freight car, you know, on the sidelines, and everybody put all their old scrap metal in there. Well, she threw a bicycle that was good, so we helped ourselves to put our old one back there. It was a nice one. She found out about it. I thought she was going to kill Dad. Well, that was such a good memory.
So you guys would have one bike and you'd all share it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'd sit on the handlebars, or sit across the bar, or hang on the back or something like that. Yeah.
Did you ever go to any of the movie nights at the old community hall?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So Bob used to run that.
Bob
Yeah.
used to run them. Is that where you guys met?
No, I'd always known the Walkers, because they had been, but Mount Currie was a different place than Pemberton.
Yeah.
And then he worked at the school. He was a school bus driver, and I worked at the school too, so we got to know each other.
Oh, I didn't realize you worked at the school too. You
Yeah,
were the secretary
when the mill
at
was
the
running
school?
over here, they had so many kids at that school that I was a teacher aide.
Okay.
And I think one of the grade 8 classes, I think, had 40 kids in it, and the room was only this big.
You mean during the Evans stud mill?
Evans stud mill, yeah.
Oh.
And then when the government changed, then the ones that's out, it was NDP or something, the other one was conservative.
Oh, so the government change is what
Oh,
closed
yeah.
the doors on that mill.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I worked at some.
So those movie nights, would everyone in town come out to those? Was it a
Oh,
big crowd?
yeah.
Yeah.
25 cents in the room.
And what kind of movies would be showing? Like current
Oh,
movies?
yeah,
Or?
well, they were good. I remember that one there. What the heck was it now? It was 2 reels long, so we had intermission.
Gone with the Wind?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Is that the one that?
I Don't Give a Damn.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
That one. Yeah.
And there were dances at that community hall
Yeah,
too,
and
right?
we had badminton games on the games there. We all played badminton.
Badminton?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, there seemed to be so many things for kids to do in those days, but there doesn't seem to be anything to do for kids anymore. You know, there's nothing, there's no... I just
You mean
wish-
like evening activities,
Yeah,
social activities?
yeah, like if they put a, what do you call it, bowling alley or something in that barn, that would have been really something, or skating rink or swimming pool or something. You know, just something, although we got 1 mile lake now, but it looks like a mud hole. We used to swim in that lake, but the 1 Mile Creek used to come in one end of that and then go around and out the other side. So there wasn't that many weeds. And then when the weeds got bad, we took 2 boats and put a big heavy lead thing or something on chains and dragged them and pulled the weeds out. So simple to take out. Yeah. So the kids are getting to use it. We used to skate there all the time. Yeah.
It doesn't seem like Pemberton is as cold. The winters don't seem to be as severe as they used to be.
1950 it was 50 below.
50 below.
Yeah.
Is that when Anderson Lake froze? I heard a story that it was so cold one winter, it may have been in the 50s.
No, that wasn't 50. That wasn't 1950. Sorry, that was the year later. It was must have been 76 or 77, something like that. Because I had 3 grandchildren born in the hospital. Squamish froze up, so they all had to come home. Yeah, and going out and cutting the ice out of the ditch for the cows to drink. And the day the ditch dried up, the weather changed. Never forget that little. It's such a chore to go out there and get them all watered and all that.
So you don't think the winters are as bad today as they
Oh,
were?
no.
Pretty mild.
Well, it was 1950, there was about 5 feet of snow. It started snowing about the 20th of December, and it didn't quit until about the 5th of January. It just snowed and snowed and snowed. And we were living right at the corner. I always had the job of milking the cows, and it was over at it was Fred's place at the time. But trying to get over there and to milk the cow and then try to get home with it, it was a real chore.
In 5 feet of snow, yeah.
Yeah, it was really, really snowy.
And in those days, I guess when there was a big weather event, roads just would stay closed for days, right?
As a matter of fact, lots of times they had some kind of a machine that they pulled along and it put the snow on the road for the sleighs.
Oh, I see.
And that was always our big treat, was somebody come to Pemberton with a sleigh to get groceries or something, and we'd hang on the sleigh going back and for about a mile, and then we'd get up and run home.
Because your sister Judy had said that the road from the corner to town used to be so bad in the spring that you couldn't get through it.
Yeah.
And I think she told a story to us about losing one of her boots in the mud because the mud was so thick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the mud was terrible. They had what they had, like where she's saying about the road being terrible, that was corduroy. You know, kind of logs.
With the logs.
Kind of thing. That's the only thing that saved that. But I remember when Robbie was 2, so before, he was 2 years old. He was a big, strong kid who walked out onto the road and stepped into a rut and went over frontwards like this in the mud, just about drowned right in the mud, right in the road. Just terrible all along where we bought that place.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Swampy ground.
Yeah. Oh, some muck, huh?
So being Pemberton's oldest Pembertonian, the last question I have for you is, do you have any advice that you'd give to anybody who's new to Pemberton?
Well, there's so many new people here now, they've changed Pemberton so much, I don't think that any advice I gave them would make any difference at all. It's, yeah, you go to the store, you see people that you haven't, you would never speak to before, and all of a sudden, oh, you know, they're just so friendly, they know somebody.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Just, well, where we live here, we hardly even know that Pemberton has changed, but, you know, it really has. Just,
And the most change, I guess, has happened most recently, right? In
the last 5 years, yeah. 5 or 6 years. And I don't think it's really better.
No. It's not as tight a community?
No, that's it, you know. Like we used to have baseball games and softball games. The women had a team and the men had a team and Mount Curry had a team. These guys, they were the wagon burners and Pemberton was the zipperheads. That was the names of the baseball teams. And every Sunday everybody would get there for a ball game, you know. They got a beautiful ball field down here. I've never seen anybody on it.
Yeah.
But I know that Pat's friend, Elmer, he tried to start up with it because he was on the wagon burners. It was him and his 6 brothers on the team. So, and he tried to start a team, but nobody showed up.
Out of all of the places in Pemberton, what do you think you'd say is your favorite place in Pemberton?
Well, of course, my farm was
The farm.
That was my favorite place. Like I gave it to the kids after
It'd be nice though to still have so much family around in Pemberton.
Oh yeah. I know I got a grandson up in Smithers. He was flying a helicopter and doing his thing, and then I got another one in Burns Lake, who runs the ice arena there. But it just seems like I hate to see my family go. I want to keep them all in an old mother hen.
Keep them all in the valley.
Yeah, yeah.
Were there any other things you wanted to tell us today?
The road going out over to the Hurley is a nice trip. It's awfully rough going. It's on.
The Hurley Road is
Yeah.
a nice trip.
Yeah.
Did you do the drive to Braylon?
Yeah. We drove that way, and when it first opened, we had to go over it, and then we came around this way. And that was kind of nice. You're not locked in anymore. Until the road went out through this way, I almost felt sorry.
You were at the end of the road.
Yeah. Then once you get to Lillooet and go out through that way, we sort of felt that we were loose. We could do anything we wanted.
Yeah. Pemberton was not the end of the line anymore.
No, that's it.